Hi, good evening. Steve Adler. Got a minute? We're not going to be on very long tonight. After all, it's a holiday weekend and there are fireworks to watch on the TV, on your computer, safely home with your family. Let's look at some numbers. Let's pull up the first dashboard. Again, this is on the city's website. Always start with new hospitalizations. The number is 65 today. That's down from 71. But 65 is still a really high number. It gets us close to the 70, which was our first benchmark to figure out whether we needed to take action or not to go into red. When we get to 70 as a 7-day average, it doesn't necessarily mean we go into red. It means we have to start thinking about it, all dependent on how quickly we go into 70. The 7-day average is 59.1. That is up from 58.3 yesterday. Remember, over the last week and a half, we've been changing behaviors. We put in an order that said that businesses had to require masks in their stores. Grocery stores went back and were requiring masks. You could feel more people wearing masks beginning about a week and a half ago. These hospitalization numbers don't reflect that at all, because the folks that are showing up in our hospitals now got sick before we made any of those behavior changes. So for a while, those numbers are going to continue to go up no matter what we do. But at 65, it's good that we're not screaming up at this point. But again, one day does not a pattern make, but it is an additional piece of data. 65 and 59.1. Number of new cases today. On the other side, 314. That is significantly below our 7-day average, which you can see is 559, just under 560. That is that's a good sign. It's only one data point, and one data point does not a trend make. The number could be 800 tomorrow. We wouldn't know. That is a full day's count. We have no backlog of cases, so that's a full day count. It could be that, well, who knows? But I will tell you, I'm much happier seeing 314 than seeing 814. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm happy to see 314. It would be nice if we started seeing those numbers. Now, that number could more reflect changes of behavior that were occurring over the last 10 days, because the behavior changes we make, if more people are wearing masks because of what we did with businesses, that's going to be the first number that it starts to show up at. The others are more and more lagging indicators. We've gone over the new hospitalizations today, 65 with a 7-day running average of 59.1. What are the 7-day averages with respect to folks that are in our hospitals? Those are the green numbers, blue numbers down at the bottom. 373 7-day running average for people that are hospitalized. In ICU, 7-day average 130. On ventilators, 7-day average 63. You compare those numbers to the ones that we actually had. Stay on this chart. Don't move, Anita. But I'll tell you, because we'll get there in a second, I'll tell you that the number of people actually hospitalized tonight, 418. So we're still having a geometric increase in the number of people that are hospitalized, still higher than our 7-day average. That's not going to reflect any recent behaviors. ICUs, we have 151 people tonight in our intensive care units. That's significantly higher than the 130. And as we talked about last week, the intensive care units is where our system is going to be most challenged over the next couple weeks, because that's where we're going to have the chief issues with respect to staffing. We can create more ICU beds, but staffing is going to be an issue. Another reason why we want to wear masks and keep the count low is so that we protect the doctors and nurses, especially those that are in our ICUs. You saw what happened when ICUs just get totally inundated. Those frontline first responder medical experts in our community are at risk, so are their families. So we need to do everything we can to protect them. On ventilators, 63 is the 7-day average. We have 66 people tonight on ventilators. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. The numbers I just gave you with the census in the hospital and the census on ICUs and ventilators are what you see in the second dashboard. They're in green, and that's on the city page. With the new cases, the 314 new cases we have today, that takes us just over 11,000 confirmed cases in the city of Austin. That's the number off to the left. People have passed away, 134. Which means that today we had an additional person pass away. And again, our thoughts and prayers are with their family. As we go through this, sometimes you get lost in the numbers and you forget that there really are real people that are impacted by this. Across the country, we're seeing younger and younger people end up in our ICU units. I told you that a few days ago we had a couple 17-year-olds that had passed away. Yesterday we had a 5-year-old that passed away, not in Texas. I think the 5-year-old was in Florida, I think. But just goes to show you that everybody is potentially susceptible. All right, so let's talk about some of the numbers that we're seeing now. With respect to where we are. I told you that if we stay on the current trajectory that we're on, we're going to have problems. So let's pull up, Anita, if we could, that first exhibit. This shows you what happens if our behaviors don't change. We've looked at charts that look a lot like this. The first one, you can see, talks about hospitalizations, total hospitalizations. This is the census. In our hospital, as you recall, we have 418 people in our hospitals right now, COVID. On the left-hand graph, you can see we're getting to that 400 point about at the beginning of July. That red line that you see down at the bottom really isn't a red line at all. It's a series of red dots that were the actual day count. As you move to the right, you can see the black line, and that's a projection of what's going to happen to us if we don't change behaviors. And you can see that the median or average line goes above our 1,500 capacity, which is the number we're trying not to go above. That's our capacity for hospital beds. We know we can surge past that and then put beds at the convention center and that kind of stuff, but you don't really want to go past that capacity. That's why we have the triggers. That's why we're asking people to change behaviors. You can see where we're headed if we can't change the trajectory. The graph on the right, similar kind of thing, shows you not what the total census is, but what is the number of the average daily new hospital admissions based on a 7-day running average. You know that the number that we talked about just a second ago is 59.1. So somewhere about 60, somewhere between 50 and 70. And we're hitting that point here just at the beginning of July, just as the model would have indicated. Real concerned if that 59.1 goes to 70. If we're following the same trajectory without changing in behaviors, you can see how quickly we get up to 150 new hospitalizations a day. You can see just how fast we go from 50 to 150. It just takes just a couple weeks. But on this current trajectory, we're just way up there within a couple weeks, certainly before we get to August. That's what a geometric increase of the virus does. It just picks up speed. So the question we're going to be looking at now here over the next week is, are we slowing things down? Are we bending the trajectory? Can we go past 70 because we're slowing it down? Does the behaviors that we saw, beginning with increased masking about 10 days ago on June 22nd, when the governor said we could enforce it through businesses, is that changing behavior? It's still real early to tell. I'll tell you, I did go out today to walk around with my granddaughter, and almost everybody that we ran into was wearing a mask. And I couldn't say that 2 weeks ago. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the indicators that would tell us whether or not we're changing behaviors. We're going to be able to look at new cases as our chief indicator. It's still a little early yet to see that, I think. But let's take a look at the first exhibit. We have a series of 3 I want to show you. This is measuring restaurant visits. I think they do this by looking at all the cell phones and where they're moving around the city. You can see back in February and March the amount of restaurant visits we had. And you can see what happened in March when we did the stay at home. People stopped going out to restaurants. This is, as you can see visually, why it is that restaurants are hurting so much economically right now. All through our city, there are people that are hurting economically because of this virus. It's just running havoc on their businesses. This is the story for restaurants, where they were in February. March comes way down. That was our stay at home. And then as we got toward the end of April and into May, people started going out to restaurants more and more. We got to May and into June. And you can see as we got into the first week or 2 of June, we were just headed right up almost to the same kind of restaurant use that we were seeing back in February and March. Not quite. But this is what we're looking at right now. With the masking, with people staying at home, with people trying to bend the curve, do we see a reduction? And you can see, if you squint a little bit, I think, still too early to tell, but it looks as if behaviors were changing for the second half of June. If that's true, that means we're helping to bend this curve, and we're going to be able to help with the surge in our hospital. Let's take a look at another indicator other than restaurant use. This next chart, just like the first chart, we read it the same way, but it's looking at park visits now. You can see the number of people that were out and going to the parks, and how that number dropped when we had the stay at home in March and April. As we got toward the end of April, how the number started going up again, rose through May. Into the second week in June, when we hit our highest number, similar to what we had back in February and March. And then it looks like it's starting to come down as we end the month of June. People trying to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more cautious, recognizing that this virus was accelerating and coming back to us. Let's go ahead and look at the third one of these indicators. None of these are exact, and it's not like we can tell from those how we're decreasing the transfer of the virus, but it's anecdotally, it's good information. This is time spent at home. February and March, not a lot of time spent at home. Everybody was out doing other stuff. Then we had stay at home, and you can see how in March and April, more and more people spending more and more time at home until we get into the end of April and into May, people spending less and less time at home. We cross over into June. And then the last part of June, it looks like more and more people are heeding what the governor has asked, what I've asked. If you can, stay at home until we can get a better handle on this virus that's happening to us right now. So those are all 3 good indicators that would indicate that maybe we're seeing something that as a community we're rallying to this challenge. Let me look at one last chart. This is a chart that's real rough again. It looks at the transmission rate for virus. You can see how back in our behaviors in March, that's the kind of lives we used to live. We get into March, we do the stay at home, we stopped the transfer of the virus. This is the R0 score. The R0 in that time in April started getting closer to 1. At our low point, I think we were like at 1 point, we were getting close to 1 back then as we stomped down the virus. You move into May and into June, you can see the transmission rate starts to increase. If you squint a little bit, it looks like it was peaking right as we turned into June in this chart, because I think maybe it's heading down. In talking to the experts, they say it's hard to draw conclusions from this, but it looks like maybe the R naught, the transmission rate, is going down. To the right is just a blow up of the part of the graph to make it bigger, the very end of the graph, and it looks like it might be headed down a little bit. So those are all good signs. If we can in fact change the trajectory we're on, then that first graph that we had that talked about what we were looking at for hospitalizations and ICUs, if we don't change behavior, maybe we can bend those graphs a little bit. If you pull back up, Anita, that first chart again on the transmission, one of the questions is if we can bend the behaviors, then maybe we don't follow the dark line anymore. Maybe we follow one of those lines that's to the right of the dark line, if we can change our behaviors, and maybe we can pull it so that we don't get up to 1500 until later than August, maybe September, October. Maybe if we pulled it back, we could get to one of those other lines even farther to the right, and maybe not get to 1000. If you get far enough to the right, you have lines that stop going up. They reach a peak and then they start coming back down. In a perfect world, that's what we see, because that would be the kind of thing that would make school opening something that would probably be more sustainable in a way that we would recognize. So that's what we're trying to do, and I'm urging everybody to really focus on changing behavior, staying home if you can. Please wear the masks. Everybody should be wearing the mask. There are exceptions to the rule. Don't concern yourself with the exceptions. Wear the mask everywhere you possibly can if you're around anybody else. And what we know is that if somebody walks into a room and no one's wearing a mask, they're probably not going to wear one. If they walk into a room and everybody else is, then they'll probably put a mask on too. So really, that's what we should be focusing on now. Let's bend this curve. Let's do what we can so that we don't inundate our hospitals, so that we don't put our doctors and nurses at risk. I think that's all that we're going to be talking about today. I want everybody to go into the holidays and enjoy it. I've enjoyed having today to play with my granddaughter, Remy. Today, Remy and I are both wearing the same ponytail. Remy likes my ponytail. I like hers. And I'm going to leave you with just a thought about the fireworks in July 4th on the grab bag tonight. People say that we took away fireworks. Not true. Anita, if you pull on that last drawing, here they are. Here's fireworks. This is Austin Symphony photo. That is absolutely beautiful. Everybody should remember that in Memorial Day, we had a lot of people gather together, small barbecues, big gatherings, small gatherings. Everybody treated Memorial Day like the virus was gone. It wasn't gone. It was just hiding. The virus doesn't care about party or people. It just jumps from person to person to person. And the closer we bring people, the more jumping it can do. We spread out people, we separate them, we isolate them, and the virus just can't jump. This July 4th weekend, I urge everybody to really think about what July 4th is about. It's a time when we remember and we celebrate all the freedoms that we have in this country. And we recognize and need to reflect on all the people that have so selflessly acted for the common good. This is now our time. This is our moment to act in the common good. It begins this next phase with this weekend. I urge everybody to be disciplined. Don't treat this July 4th like any other in the past. This one is different. If we have a spike after this July 4th like we had after Memorial Day, the folks in our emergency rooms and hospitals are going to be put at significant risk. Please don't do that. Please be vigilant and diligent. Beautiful fireworks. I want you all to have a great weekend. Good night, and please be safe.